Dennis Dodd, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, good. It was great to see you in Arizona and have a chance to watch Alabama win the 15th national title. It's a pretty historic time here in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it wasn't surprising, but it was the way it went down. The highest scoring game in the BCS era, and solidifying Coach Saban's place wherever you want to put it right now, because it's one of the all-time greats.
Where would you put him if you had a chance to rank these guys? And I know you know about the Saban-Bryant debate that we have locally.
Yeah.
Where would you put Nick Saban in that conversation?
I wrote that. That was my story that night of the game, that you've got to start considering him as one of the best coaches of all time in team sports. Forget college football. Some of these pro coaches, John Wooden, if that sounds sacrilege, John Wooden boat raced college basketball. It was just a different game at UCLA compared to everybody else. We're talking about Alabama dominating in an era where the SEC's never been better, where recruiting is cutthroat, where the game is innovated on the field in terms of the spread offense, which Nick Saban and crew have to adjust to and actually adopt on their side. And he's made Alabama basically another NFL franchise, for better or worse, and it's led to this excellence. I think he's right up there with Red Auerbach, with Scotty Bowman, who won 10 Stanley Cups, 9 or 10, and even John Wooden. And so if you want to put Bear Bryant in there, I almost think Bear Bryant's in another category because it was a different age. He could outfit 150 players. So what did you expect at that point? This is much different.
Well, when you look at the parity in college football, I mean, you look at Clemson be a part of it. You look at other teams that are now that maybe you look back at the 60s, 70s, did not have a chance to win a national title. There was only a few teams that really could win a national title. Now, as we start out 2016, I mean, you could probably take 15 teams and make an argument that they could be right there at the thick of things at the end of the season. Yeah,
I did a column before the season where I identified, I think 13 teams had a chance, and if Oklahoma State had gotten in there, I didn't have them in there, and they had a chance late. But I obviously had Clemson and Alabama in there, but 13 teams, and the fact that someone brought this up the night of the game, and I didn't even think of it. In Nick Saban's era, you actually have to win a game to win a championship. When Paul Bryant coached, they were voted number one, and sometimes voted number one before the bowl game. Now, that's not to diminish anything that happened, because that 1966 team, the missing ring team, deserved a championship game, and that was for, I think, societal reasons that everybody knows about back then. But you actually have to win a championship game, and if you don't win that championship. That's significant.
Dennis, as we look at this year's team, what will it be in your mind from a national perspective that stuck out about this particular team here in Tuscaloosa that you could identify from your perspective?
A couple of things. Just, having been written off after Ole Miss, it was different than 11 and 12 when Alabama lost games in November, and they needed help, and they got it, and they got back in the championship game and won it. This was different because everybody was looking for a reason for this dynasty, or whatever you want to call it, to end. And that actually was the beginning or the continuation of it. They got in a room, as Lane Kiffin called it. We were in the building by ourselves and decided it's up to us now. And they did it. Derrick Henry becoming, the SEC's most productive single-season runner. And I would say Lane Kiffin himself as a play caller. In these 2 years, he's been nothing short of magnificent, developing two quarterbacks, which you'd said before the 2014 season, in early August, Blake Sims and Jake Coker are going to win you national championships. You've been laughed out of the room. So I think those three things really stick out to me. And the defense. Let's not forget the defense. That's good too.
Well, no doubt, and I think that's where. Let's go back to Lane Kiffin a couple of minutes, because we did this in the 2:00 hour. Lane Kiffin's one of those guys that he doesn't get the respect that he deserves, and it's even on the local standpoint here that we look at it. 3 months ago, I thought there was no way Lane Kiffin would be back next year, but he is, and I think people are pleading, hey, don't take an NFL job, come back to Tuscaloosa. It's amazing what winning will do for you.
Yeah, no, I think I think he's rehabbed his image to the point that he's going to be a head coach again. I don't know where. Look, it could be at a group of 5 school. I know he wants to be a head coach again. I haven't checked. I don't know if the 49ers have hired an offensive coordinator yet, but look out for that. But I definitely think he's got bigger things in his career ahead of him. He's only 40 years old. I mean, he's got, you think about it, 25 years left in his career if he goes that long. I mean, this would be a heck of a book at the end of his career.
Oh, it will.
Somebody wants to write it. But he's still seen in some circles as that quirky guy, the guy that, missed the last bus from the championship game, the guy that left Tennessee after a year. But I think when you peel it down, just as a play caller, the guy still has that talent. The talent he showed at USC when they won a couple championships.
When you wrote an article back on the 12th day of January, you go back and you say, with number 5 at his back pocket, Nick Saban faces his toughest rebuild at Alabama. Let's talk about that as far as the rebuilding process. But I think a lot of us assumed that there was a lot of juniors that were going to leave early. I know I did.
Yeah.
But
not so much now. It doesn't look as tough. I conservative estimate that day of the day after the game. Conservative estimate. I checked, and let's see, 13 starters and about 8 juniors that could leave. Now, that's a floating figure because there are about 20 starters on defense. We know that. There's so many guys that pass through there. So that was a conservative number. And I said, that's a pretty big number for a national champion, not something that can't be overcome. But now we know that it looks like only 2 juniors are leaving, and guys we pretty much expected, Ashawn Robinson and Derrick Henry. Those other guys are staying. Huge, I think, that O.J. Howard stays. They've got a chance to rebuild with Bo Scarborough. Looks like the next tailback in line. They're going to have another battle at quarterback, starting from scratch, starting over. But, a lot of people, including myself, haven't picked right at the top. I haven't picked number 2. And at this point, if nothing else, it's just faith. They've done it before. And why shouldn't they do it again? They'll be picked to win the SEC, so why not? It doesn't look like that hard to rebuild now.
We're talking to Dennis Dodd right now, Inside the Game, senior college football analyst, CBSSports.com, Inside the Game here in Tuscaloosa. Who could challenge Alabama for that SEC Western second spot and push them for number 1?
Well, LSU's going to be ranked high. Leonard Fournette and what is going to be his final year, you would think they'd get incrementally better at quarterback, but that continues to be a problem. LSU earlier this week had the number 1 recruiting class. They've got talent. Obviously, the rap on us is they don't win enough. That's another segment to the point where he almost got fired. But I think LSU is going to be really, really good with its usual defense. Texas A&M, I think, is a mess right now. Auburn, Gus is on the hot seat. So you never say never. Tennessee is going to be favored to win the East. They're going to have to play Tennessee, so look out for that. I don't know off the top of my head where that game is. I think it's Tennessee. So look out for that. But it doesn't look as daunting as it once did.
What is the biggest challenge facing college football? Just as a overall.
Oh, that's a universal question. I think some of the stuff you saw, the ratings in the playoff and declining attendance really overall, they've done a great job of shepherding us into the playoff era. I think I have no problem with the two brackets they put forth in 14 and 15. Those are the right teams. They just can't screw it up. I mean, there's concerns, really, I think, in the medical field where they've got to get their arms around the concussion issue and student-athlete welfare and safety and insurance, and I think that's going to be taken care of. We don't know. We may not know 50 years in the future why certain people are susceptible to concussions, but I know they passed a resolution at the NCAA convention that said, I think team medical personnel have the final say on whether players return to the field. And to that, I said, you mean they don't? I mean, I thought in 2015 that's not the case, or in 2016. So student-athlete welfare, player safety, ensuring these players' health after football, and I think just shepherding the game. They can't screw it up. Don't do this conference realignment to the point that people don't even recognize what football teams they're rooting for, what conferences they're rooting for.
When you look at the article that you wrote Monday, near disastrous number of early entries declaring for the 2016 NFL Draft, how big of a problem is that for college football?
I think it's a problem that, I think, well, it's a problem because a lot of guys are going to be out of work, at least their preferred line of work. And I thought they had kind of sewed up that piece last year, I think, or 2 years ago when they started the new draft evaluation, where you're either a first round, second round, or stay in school. That's your three evaluations. And it went down to 74 last year. It's up to about 100 this year, which would be another record. We'll find out Friday when the NFL officially releases the underclassmen list. But there's just not enough room in the system for 100 underclassmen. There are only 256 players taken. If you took all 100, that would be, 40%? And that's not only unlikely, but impossible. So 2 years ago, almost 40% of the underclassmen weren't taken. So they're getting bad advice somewhere. Not all of them can go in the first round. And the biggest thing I'm told from, I guess, the people that follow this stuff is, you want to be picked high because you want to get to that second contract in 3 years with some big earning power. But first you have to get on the team. The average, the average player in the NFL only lasts 4.74 years. So forget about getting to the second contract. Just get to the league in good shape. And if you're not going to be taken, if there's any question, don't declare.
Is it just they're getting bad advice? I mean, because we thought the advisory board, I think they've sort of reduced that number. Is they're just getting bad advice is why they're leaving? I mean, it's not...
I think it shows, because it's online. The college advisory committee from the NFL shows how many of those guys declared actually got draft evaluations. We assume they all did. Well, they don't. So some of this is people getting in their ear going, forget that, you're going to go in the first round. And look, you can't blame the guys who have a financial issue and they have to provide for their family and take a shot. That's part of it, too. But in the last 5 years, we've seen a record number of underclassmen come out 4 times, I think it's gone up every year 4 times in the last 5 years. So it tells me that the street agents are still out there. They're having undue influence, and they're getting these kids. It's unfortunate.
Dennis, I want to throw something up, and we're talking about money. Do you think the cost of attendance conversation, the stipend, will be a part of the off-season conversation again?
I don't. I don't hear anything about it. It's died down. It is what it is. The players get the money. It's fair. It's right. We had. I remember last year in Destin, I think there was a big talk about, this, one school's cost of attendance is bigger than another, and who actually sets that number? Well, guess what? It's the attorneys at the schools, it's the compliance people at the schools, and it's vetted through. It comes from federal funds. I think it has to be approved by the federal government, or else the school gets in trouble. So if Alabama's giving a little bit more money than Auburn, then that's just going to be the way it is. If that's a recruiting advantage, so be it. There are a lot bigger recruiting advantages. Now, I had a coach tell me within, I guess, the last week that he lost a recruit over $150 a month. In other words, that school was not offering, but was able to give, I think, $450 a month, and his school was able to give $300. He lost a recruit that way. Maybe you don't want a kid like that. You should choose your school and your program based on something more in incidentals you're going to get per month.
Just in your coverage, and I know I'm peppering you with questions, I'm trying to pick your brain, senior college football analyst Dennis Dodd. We've both talked about the NCAA before on this program. When you're looking at it, just brought it up when you were talking about the enforcement staff. Can you think of a moment in your career that it's ever been this weak? That we're talking about the NCAA enforcement staff and
enforcement. Well, I'll say this: I just talked to somebody about this today. There aren't really any, cases that I know about that are really on the front burner. A scandal, somebody being paid or something like that in football. Now, we know of academic fraud, Syracuse and North Carolina in basketball, mostly, that may touch football a little bit, and those are huge cases, but there's really nothing going on. I've got a big story coming out tomorrow on the 7-on-7 influence, and they're pretty much powerless to do anything about it. Now, on its face, it's fine. It's an off-season activity that is fun for kids. Everybody has fun. You know, you're on teams, you're on traveling teams. But if you start to dig down on it, it looks absolutely like AAU basketball, where at the end of the day, the high school coach is cut out of it, and increasingly college coaches, recruiters are dealing directly with that 7-on-7 coach, who may not even be qualified to be a coach. He may just be a guy. So that's going to be a big deal going forward. I don't know if the NCAA can do anything about it.
Yeah, I watch a lot of different things, and there's a lot of things that I just scratch my head about, especially in recruiting. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it just you see some schools that are able to do this, and it's like, how did that happen? I mean, did they flip a light switch and automatically start recruiting nationally? And it's like, it just doesn't add up sometimes. And I think about the enforcement staff and how much powerless they really are right now. And I think coaches
I don't know if powerless is the right word. They've got some really good – and look, we don't know how many cases they've got developed, but it really doesn't matter. It matters how many cases they can bring before the infractions committee and what they can prove. You know, they can say they've got 20 cases in the pipeline. Well, great, big deal. Can you convict? You know, we all know the problems with the process itself. There is no due process. You know, in the case of USC, or in any given case, you can have a convicted felon testify you and put you away. We saw that with the Reggie Bush case, rightly or wrongly. And there are flaws in it. I'll tell you something else. It will be dealt with at the 2017 NCAA convention, because in autonomy, the commissioners were given 2 years to develop a plan to deal with enforcement or how they want to alter it. And one of those options is doing away with it, you know, for good. What you want to hire a third party, an outside group that does this. It does have some sort of, you know, better way to do it. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I am saying that enforcement is under extreme scrutiny this year.